Salutations, everyone. I fear that environmentalism as an idea has grown up to become unmanageable. Part of the reason for this is that environmentalism is inherently a global issue, and therefore it is unimaginably vast. Consequently, as someone who has been invested in non-traditional grassroots environmentalism for some time, I feel that a lot of environmental movements have been pushed to the fringes, and I think this can change. One narrative that is quite alienating, which I often come across, is one of doom and gloom. This is essentially the idea that they play a guilt narrative on people by showing very rough images of the environmental situation. While these images are true, and it is fact that we are facing great environmental distress, I think it is a wrong approach, and I think it could be done in a better way. One of these reasons is because I think we can be more optimistic in what is to come. To start, there are several reasons for this. One of this comes down to population. Population is essentially the greatest contributor to our environmental problems. It acts as a multiplier for all the consumption we do. 7 billion people consuming is a lot more destructive than 1 billion people consuming. Fortunately, according to the United Nations projections in 2015, by around about 2050, we should expect the world population to stabilize and peak at about 9 billion, and after that, it should decline. The reason for this? Development. By encouraging development in countries, we initially lead to a skyrocketing population because of improved healthcare, but eventually society transitions to people having less babies, and this can transition to such an extent that in places like Europe, for instance, you can even have a population decline, which means you don't have to kill everyone to solve our environmental problems, which is great. Now, another side of this is renewable energy. Now, as we're burning through more and more fossil fuels, we are depleting them, and because of this, just by the simple laws of economics, their price goes up. You probably noticed that at all the gas stations here. That eventually means that at one point, fossil fuels will become so expensive that it'll just become more economically viable to use renewables. When this happens, and we can encourage this along through innovation and research and good investment, then we can enter the sustainable era. Another thing and final point here is that I believe nature is far more resilient than we believe. After all, the planet has gone through several global mass extinctions. The only distinction here is that this is the first artificial global mass extinction that we are undergoing. For this, I'll look at coral reefs. Coral reefs are one of the most sensitive ecosystems on our planet. And as a result, any variations in acidity or temperature resulting from climate change is very heavily felt by them. This can be seen in Australia's Great Barrier Reef, which is being hit by major bleaching events. But there's also another side to this. According to marine biologist Christine Marhaver, in some places, like in the Caribbean, some coral reefs are in fact surviving and even recovering from these bleaching events. All they really need is time, and that we could hopefully give them. Based on these thoughts of population growth, renewable energy viability, and natural resilience, I have come to develop an alternative outlook on this whole environmental discussion. Of course, there are many more reasons for developing this outlook, but I only have a few minutes, so I won't get into all of them. I call this environmental pragmatism, but you could call it eco-realism, sustainability syndrome, whatever you want. Please give me some ideas, though. Essentially, it comes down to saying we shouldn't make such a big fuss about all this environmentalism at the moment. Ultimately, climate change is a very slow problem, which is one of the reasons we have trouble dealing with it, because it's not a crisis like an economic one that we can suddenly do something about. But that also means we can have a slow solution, and one that is permanent and gradual, unlike most political revolutions. And this allows us to do two major things. First, it allows us to normalize the discussion. Environmentalism to me shouldn't really be a rant. It should be more just about helping along speeding along the process of entering the sustainable era, which I believe any sufficiently advanced civilization will do and should do. The second is that we should focus our efforts rather than simply patch our conscience. For instance, a lot of things like vegetarianism and recycling, they're wonderful and they're good initiatives, but ultimately they are just time savers. And while we should be saving time, and we should continue doing these, they're not solutions to our climate change problem. So, to wrap up this little candy of ours, I think that we should encourage our economies to make sustainability inevitable. And that is where economic movements like the Leave Earth Alone Foundation previously should, and could place themselves. There are already a lot of possibilities out there, like investing in electrical cars, because gas cars can never really become sustainable because they're always going to be relying on fossil fuels. Where electric cars, while they're sourced from electrical power, which is mostly fossil fuels at the moment, can eventually transition to renewable. So there's paths open, and I think that we should open these further. Thank you.